How do you go from this to this? There are several steps involved, a lot of details, but it's all worth it in the end. I'm going to take you through the process of building a new house, start to finish. Welcome back to our series where we're taking you through the process of building a home, start to finish. In the last episode, we went through the rough-in stage where the mechanical, plumbing, and electrical rough-ins were in the walls, and today we're going to go through the next phase, which is closing up the walls, hanging drywall, and getting ready for paint. After the rough-in stage is complete, insulation goes in and then the drywall gets hung. This is a major marker in the construction process because it starts to feel like a real house. There are several steps for the drywall process, and the crew is typically in the house for at least a week to get all of this done. So they've got to first hang the drywall, then they've got to tape and float, and they've got to sand. And they do this to make sure everything is straight and smooth. So basically it just means that we're prepping the walls to get ready for texture and paint. Once the drywall crew is done, then texture gets sprayed onto all of the walls and the ceiling. There are varying degrees of texture. For this project, we chose to go with a very light orange peel texture, and that's pretty much what I spec in 95% of my projects. I personally don't love a really heavy texture on the walls, so that's why I always tend to spec something that's lighter. I think there are certain instances where a heavy texture makes sense, but for the majority of my projects, we usually just spec a very light orange peel. I also love a smooth finish on walls, but it's the most expensive drywall finish there is. And the reason it's so expensive, or the most expensive, is because the crews have to work extra hard to make sure that everything is really straight and perfect, because with a smooth texture, you will see any imperfection in the wall. And by adding a little bit of texture, any type of texture whatsoever, it just hides these imperfections. Once the walls are ready and the texture's been applied, then the painting crew comes back in and they will apply primer to all of the walls and the ceilings. And they like to get in there and do this before anything major gets installed into the house. This way there's just less for them to cover up, and they only have to worry about covering up the windows. Usually at this phase, we'll do like a walk with the trim carpenter, and this is for us to go over all of the details that he is going to be installing and providing for the house. So for example, trim work includes all of the casings around the doors, the trim around the windows, the baseboards. You'll usually talk about stairs, and then any other accent trim, like any kind of applied trim work that's going to be happening in any part of the house. For this project, we're not doing any trim around the windows. We're going to keep those drywall. It's going to be very clean and modern. And typically, if this was the aesthetic we were going for, like we are in this house, it's typically what I do. If for whatever reason I needed to have trim around the windows, I would lean towards something that was on the thinner side. We do, however, have one exception in this house, and that is for the focal wall in the master bedroom. We are applying a shiplap wood to the wall in a chevron pattern, but we need that trim to dye into something when it gets to the windows. So we've got two windows on that wall, and it just made sense when we were thinking about all the options to add trim around the windows and have a place for the shiplap to dye into. So this way you don't see any raw edges and everything's really trimmed out and clean. The trim around the doors is gonna be a 1x4, which means that they're gonna be 3.5 inches wide. So it's gonna be very clean, very simple. We're gonna do mitered corners. And the reason that you have to have casing around the door is because there's a gap that you'll have to fill between the wall and the frame of the door itself. So this just cleans all the edges up, looks very nice. I have props.
Oh, good.
For the baseboards, we are gonna be using a 1x8, which means they're gonna be 7.5 inches tall. I personally love taller baseboards. I just think that they make this space feel more grand. So whenever I get the opportunity to do a tall baseboard, it's always the direction I go. We don't just want to do a plain 1x8 for the baseboard. We want to add a little detail, add a little bit of interest to it. So this is an example of just a standard baseboard. And what we've decided to do is the baseboard's gonna get installed, and then we're gonna come in with this little 3/4 inch trim piece here that will add to the top. This will create some dimension. It's gonna make it a little bit taller, but we'll basically have this step detail running throughout the house, and I think it's gonna look really clean and classic. I already mentioned the focal wall in the master bedroom, but we also have another focal wall that the carpenter is gonna be installing. This focal wall is the stair wall. So when you come into the house, it's one of the first things you're gonna see. To create this pattern, the carpenter is going to be installing panels and applying these skinny 1.5 inch trim pieces to create this gridded effect. And when we did our walkthrough, we talked through all the details of where we're starting, where we're stopping, and we're carrying that design from wall to wall. So when you get upstairs, there's 2 doorways that are now gonna be incorporated into the design. It's gonna have major impact by making it go all the way from wall to wall, end to end. And we know that we're gonna want to really make this wall pop by painting it in a really deep saturated color. So I'm very excited to see this get installed. Thanks so much for watching this episode. In the next episode, we are going to be talking about cabinet install and paint colors. Very fun and exciting. So make sure to subscribe to our channel and follow us on YouTube for more videos on the series. Thanks so much.
Great.